Welcome to DataTex. Let's take a look at what happens if you reuse a device and how it affects the various aspects of your software setup. Each supervisor login has access to a group and everything below that group. This facility is accessed through the supervisor interface. The web admin interface has the administration settings of Amethyst. This is where the reuse of devices is managed. There is a single login here and only one person can be logged into this interface at a time. When a recording is made on a device or an extension on a recording server, the path details are added to the metadata to uniquely identify this recorded device. Once the recording is uploaded to the Amethyst server, the server needs to decide whether or not it is allowed to process that call into the system. That decision is managed on the web admin's mapping page. The information will be checked and whether a license is available to process the device's recording. Start by logging into the web admin. You will see that the interface looks different. Click on Mapping. This is where all the devices that have tried to load into Amethyst are listed. At the top of the page, there are various ways to filter your search for the devices that you are looking for. Everything on the left-hand side of the page is the unique identifier for each recording. This is called the path. The controller ID is the PABX or telephone system that facilitates the call. The tenant ID is the tenant where it was recorded. On single-tenanted systems, this usually shows the client name. The device is the individual device that makes the call, the extension, SIP account, or trunk phone number. The DataTex capture ID is the recording software that has been used. You can have different paths that are all the same user. For example, you could be recorded on Teams and on a physical phone. It just indicates that the calls are being recorded through different places, whether that be the controller ID, the tenant, the device, or the capture ID. The path section cannot be edited as it is predetermined by the recording software when it was recorded. If the telephone system and recording method supports getting the username, the name will be displayed here already. If it does not support getting the username, it will do this. It takes the device details and adds ext to the front. If a recording is processed in with a blank username or with ext in the front of the username from the mapping page will be used to replace the username on the recording. If a recording has a username that is not blank and does not start with ext, that is the preferred username and will not be changed on the recording. If the mapping page username is blank or starts with ext, the mapping page username is updated to the username from the recording. When a username is changed on the mapping page, the next call that comes through with that path and with a blank or an ext username will be named to match the new username. The right side of the screen describes what happens to recording once it is allowed to process. The status says what needs to be done to the recording. So, if it is set to record, then it will be allowed into the system and it will be allocated to the default group specified here. You can also set it to do not record, which means it won't load onto the system. If you set it to delete, a pop-up will appear asking if you are sure you would like to delete this line. It will also state a new map entry will be created with the default group when the next recording for this device is processed. This means that the line will disappear from this mapping screen once you click on Apply, but it will stay under your groups on the system as historically that device did record. The line will no longer show on the mapping screen. However, if a new call comes in, it will see that the path is no longer there and add a new entry. There are a few things that will happen. First, it will check if there are licenses available. If there is, it will set it to the default status of record and add it to the default group on your system. It will then automatically start processing those recordings in. Now there will be two entries in the group for this recorded device on the system. The first will be the original calls, and the second will be the new calls made on the same device after the deletion process. This is useful when an extension needs to be reused for a new user. Deleting the device ensures that the new user and the old user's calls can be separately allocated in the groups. The new user won't have to access the old user's calls. Once the group has been set up for the new user, only the correct supervisors will have the access to that user's calls. This group is where the recording will load to. So, for example, this recording will load to the group New Data Text, which you can see here, if you type in the group name. That extension will then be added to that group. Everyone that has access to that group will now have access to the recordings on that device. If you are deleting a device, you are also freeing up a license. You don't want unused devices making use of licenses. When last recorded shows when last each device has processed a recording into the system. When changes are made, the last column will tick the modify box. If you leave it that way when you click on apply, the change will be made. If you untick the box, the change for that line won't be saved when you select apply. Heading over to the supervisor side, on the supervisor, go to administrations and select group user maintenance. Select a group. Now it asks for a second group. The drop-down will only show groups that are available under the first group selected. This is the From group, and this is the To group. Available users only shows everything under that group, and allocated users only shows everything under that group. Choose a second group. Now you can see that this group, Reception, has access to this group, Cape Town, by selecting the users and then dragging them across. The Cape Town group will now have access to the calls that were made on that device up until the point that it was deleted. If the new device is also dragged across, the group will also have access to the new calls made on that device. If you want to give, for example, Belinda access to Johannesburg and not just Cape Town, you will have to select the higher source group to do this, which is Reception. It will automatically find all the devices below the higher source group under available users to be able to drag across to the destination group or allocated users. The available user list is determined by the users in the group structure from the selected group and below it. The names you see are the names as they appear on the mapping page. That is what happens if you reuse a device and how it affects the various aspects of your software setup. Subscribe to our page to view more how-to videos on our products.